It was an ordinary afternoon, the kind where the hours stretched out unhurriedly and the air outside was thick with the heavy warmth of summer. I had just finished my coffee, still clad in my loose linen pants and an old, well-worn t-shirt, my bare feet cool against the hardwood floor. The house was unusually still. No television murmuring in the background, no quiet churning of the dishwasher, just the steady ticking of the clock and the occasional rustling of leaves outside. That was when I heard the knock. It wasn't the light, uncertain tapping of a delivery driver or the urgent pounding of someone in a rush. It was steady, intentional. I frowned, not expecting any visitors. Curious, I wiped my hands on a dish towel and walked to the door. When I pulled it open, I found myself face to face with someone I hadn't anticipated, Ethan, my neighbour's husband. Ethan was the type of man who carried himself with effortless ease. In his late 50s, with salt and pepper hair that only added to his distinguished appearance, he always exuded a relaxed, approachable demeanour. Over the years, we had exchanged friendly hellos, brief conversations when we happened to cross paths outside, but nothing beyond that. Yet today, he stood on my porch, his hands tucked into his jeans pockets, his brow slightly creased. "Hey, Lydia," he greeted, his voice warm but edged with something I couldn't quite pinpoint. "Sorry for dropping by unannounced." I smiled politely, stepping aside to let him in. "No problem. Everything all right?" He hesitated briefly before stepping over the threshold. "Yeah, just needed to get out for a bit." I nodded, shutting the door behind him. "Coffee?" I offered, motioning toward the kitchen. He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "That would be great." As I moved to the counter, I could feel the weight of his presence behind me. There was something about the way he leaned against the edge of the island, an air of unease that made it clear he hadn't come just for a cup of coffee. As I poured, he finally spoke again. "Things have been complicated at home," he admitted. "I just needed a breather." I glanced over my shoulder at him, the coffee pot still in my hand. "I see. Is everything all right with Claire?" Claire, his wife, was a lovely woman. Always composed, always polite, but I had noticed recently that there was a shift between them. Fewer shared smiles, fewer casual exchanges. Something had changed. Ethan let out a quiet chuckle, though it lacked humour. "Let's just say marriage isn't always simple." I nodded knowingly. I had been married once, long ago. I understood how love could morph into something unfamiliar, something distant. I handed him his cup, and for a fleeting moment, as our fingers touched, a current of something unspoken passed between us. He seemed to notice it too, because he cleared his throat and quickly pulled his hand away. For the next few minutes, we spoke of simple things, our neighbours, the weather, the way summer was beginning to fade. But beneath the surface, an underlying tension lingered. At one point, he leaned forward, resting his forearms on the counter, his gaze meeting mine with quiet intensity. "You ever feel like you're just going through the motions?" he asked. I swallowed, my fingers tightening around my cup. "Yeah, I do." It was an admission I hadn't planned to make. The air between us felt thick, charged with something unsaid. For a moment, I thought he might say something that would alter the course of this interaction entirely. But then he leaned back, exhaling a soft laugh. "Sorry, I didn't mean to unload all that on you." I smiled, though my heartbeat was still a little too fast. "It's okay." He glanced at the clock and stood up. "I should probably head back." I nodded, following him to the door. As he reached for the handle, he hesitated again, his eyes meeting mine with an unreadable expression. "Thanks, Lydia," he said quietly, "for listening." And then he was gone. I closed the door behind him, pressing my back against it, my fingers still warm from where they had touched his. I told myself it was nothing, but something inside me whispered that this wasn't the last time Ethan would come knocking. The days that followed were strangely restless. I told myself Ethan's visit was nothing more than a man needing a moment to breathe, that his words didn't carry any deeper meaning. But if that were true, why did I keep replaying our conversation in my mind? Why did I find myself looking toward their house whenever I stepped outside, wondering if I'd see him again? I tried to dismiss it, to carry on as if nothing had shifted, but something had. A week later, he returned. This time, I saw him approaching through the kitchen window. It was early evening, the sky streaked with deep oranges and purples, and he moved with a purpose that sent my pulse racing. I barely had time to compose myself before he knocked. I opened the door to find him standing there, hands in his pockets once again, but this time his expression was different, more intentional. "Hey," he said, his voice steady. "Mind if I come in?" I hesitated for only a moment before stepping aside. "Of course." He stepped inside, and as I shut the door behind him, I took a deep breath, silently reminding myself to keep this light, to not overanalyze the fact that I had been hoping he would return. He turned to face me, his eyes locking onto mine with quiet intensity. "I should probably start by saying I don't know why I'm here." I let out a small, nervous laugh. "That makes two of us." He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I haven't been able to stop thinking about the other day." My stomach tightened. "Ethan?" He lifted a hand, stopping me. "I'm not here to cross any lines. I don't know. I feel like you actually see me. Do you know how rare that is?" His words sent a shiver through me because, God help me, I knew exactly what he meant. I had spent so much of my life feeling unseen, like an afterthought. And now here was this man, this kind, complex man, standing in my kitchen telling me that I mattered. I swallowed hard. "I see you, Ethan, but I don't know what that means." He took a step closer, his voice softer now. "Neither do I." The space between us buzzed with something unspoken yet undeniable. My pulse pounded as he studied my face as if searching for permission to say more, to do more. And for one reckless moment I wanted to let whatever this was unfold. But then, just as quickly as the moment built, he stepped back, shaking his head with a self-deprecating smile. "I should go." I nodded, though part of me wanted to ask him to stay. He hesitated at the door, giving me one last lingering glance before stepping out into the dimming light. As the door clicked shut, I leaned against it, pressing a hand to my chest. This was dangerous, and yet deep down I knew this wasn't over. I kept catching myself looking toward his house, half expecting to see him standing there waiting. But he didn't return. Not for days. The silence stretched between us, pressing against me with a weight I hadn't anticipated. My thoughts kept circling back to his presence, the strange, unspoken pull I had felt whenever he was near. I told myself it was foolish. He was married. I wasn't someone's temptation. I had no right to dwell on him, no matter how easily I could imagine what it might be like to be truly noticed, to be understood by a man like him. But then, one evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon and the world outside blurred into shadow, there was another knock. This time, when I opened the door, Ethan was there again, standing in the fading light. His expression was different, more serious, more resolved. "I need to talk to you, Lydia," he said quietly. I swallowed against the sudden tightness in my throat. "Ethan." He stepped inside before I could say another word. "I can't stop thinking about you." The words were simple, yet they carried a weight that settled thickly in the space between us. Neither of us moved, the air between us humming with tension. "You're married," I whispered, though even as I said it, I knew it wasn't the response I truly wanted to give. His gaze never wavered. "I know, but that doesn't change how I feel." I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came. The weight of the moment held me in place, as if the air itself had grown heavier around us. "I've been with Claire for over 30 years, he went on, his voice raw. "But when I'm with you for the first time in so long, I feel alive." My breath hitched. The way he was looking at me, as if he saw every hidden piece of me I had kept tucked away for years, was enough to shake the foundation I had so carefully built around myself. "I don't know what to do with that," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I met his gaze, my own voice trembling. "I don't either." There was no longer any need for small talk, no space for pretense. We stood there, inches apart, the silence thick with everything we weren't saying. I could hear the unevenness of his breath, feel the heat of his presence, sense the uncertainty laced with something deeper, something undeniable. "I don't want to hurt anyone, Lydia," he murmured, "but I don't want to lose this feeling either." My pulse pounded. I felt it too, that pull, that impossible connection. But I forced myself to hold back, to gather the words that would tether me to reason. "I don't want to hurt you either, Ethan," I said softly. "But it's complicated." The silence that followed was thick, heavy with everything we wanted to say but couldn't. Finally, he stepped back, shoulders slumping just slightly. "I know," he said, his voice rough. I'm sorry, Lydia. He turned toward the door, reaching for the handle, and something inside me twisted. Ethan, wait. He stilled, glancing back at me, his expression hovering between hope and hesitation. I wasn't sure what overcame me in that moment, but all the careful barriers I had built around my heart crumbled. I stepped forward, closing the space between us. I don't have the answers either, I said softly. But I can't pretend like nothing has changed. I can't ignore how I feel. His breath caught, and for the briefest moment, he hesitated. Then, with quiet deliberation, he reached out, his fingers brushing against mine. Light, testing, as if feeling for something unspoken in the air between us. And in that fleeting touch, the charge between us surged, undeniable. I don't want to walk away from this, he whispered. I don't either, I confessed. And in that moment, it wasn't about stepping over a line, about betraying or taking something that wasn't ours to have. It was about recognition. Two people acknowledging something that had quietly, inevitably taken root between them. An unspoken understanding. A connection neither of us had been searching for but had found anyway. When he left that night, the air between us felt lighter, though nothing had been resolved. It wasn't the ending I had expected, but perhaps it was the beginning of something else, something just as real, just as powerful. We didn't have all the answers, but for the first time in a long while, I felt seen. And sometimes, that alone is enough to start again.